So really what I wanted to do this week for us was finish up our kind of gear armor. Obviously you guys have creative freedom to kind of do different things, right? Obviously we want arms, legs, heads, a face, fingers, toes. But you know, you can kind of come up with your own designs and play with your own forms. Remember, you do want to keep kind of refining shape also. You know, you can kind of see how I've got like some nice kind of curvature here, kind of giving the legs kind of thinner parts here and thicker parts there. That's pretty easy to do, just do moving, scaling, edge loops, or just edges. Also remember, if you go to edit preferences, right, you can always go to the key map section here and turn on that industry compatible feature, right? And that's going to make it so that you're using navigation in Blender and manipulators just like in Maya, right? Alt left moves camera or rotates camera, alt middle moves camera, alt right zooms, and of course things like Q works for your selection tool, W works for move, E works for rotate, R works for scale. By default, Blender has kind of its own quick keys for that stuff. But the my ones tend to just kind of be more in line with industry standard and just kind of ergonomically a little bit nicer. So keep that in mind, right, that we're in here. Now, really what we were starting to explore was kind of gear and armor for this, right? And I just wanted to kind of reinforce a few things. One, of course, is that we want our snap face tools to be on, because I'm going to kind of do a little bit more with kind of the retopoing here. So remember, this one's your snap face. That one's your proportional edit, right? That's kind of for soft selection. It's kind of Blender's equivalent to my soft selection, so it'll kind of pull whatever you have selected further around it. So keep that in mind. You might want that off. But in this case, we want this one on because that is our snapping tools, right? And we did kind of pick to go to face here. Project onto self is kind of on by default, as well as closest, but there are a couple of different options here, which is kind of cool. But we're going to be fine here, right? We're not trying to get to know every facet of Blender for this project, just enough to get us a good basis. But you do have some snapping tools in here, right? And you'll actually see in many ways they're better than Maya's. You have things like edge center and stuff like that, which is kind of cool. So you actually have a little bit kind of better snapping features in Blender than, say, in Maya. All right, so that's on, right? We're, of course, going to use that polybuild tool here in a minute as well again, but we do want to make sure that we've got the proper objects selected, right? And they are right here, of course, but if you hit 4, right, remember that puts you in object select, and that makes it quite easy to just click on the object in view, and you see how it just kind of highlights here what's object selected. In this case, we want to select the kind of gear armor because that's what we're working on. And then, of course, remember that quick key's 4, right? It sends you to object mode, which is right here. But you'll see that edit 1 is edit mode. And that's really just sending you into vertex mode. 2 will do edges, 3 will do faces. And I know I've talked about this plenty of times, but I just want to make sure that you guys are getting these things reinforced, right? I go over these things multiple times in all the videos. I was going over in the beginning videos. Remember, you guys have all of these videos up for every step on this character. In fact, I created that video channel now, right? So that they're all kind of there, and that's why I'm going to be putting those. Of course, I'll put them in the normal posts, but I'll put them there as well, just so you can have like one place to grab them. Remember, if you need to go back and watch some of the earlier videos, that's the whole point of the videos, is you can watch them as many times as you need to kind of go over these things. All right, so we've got that selected. We're in face mode. Remember, some of the things you can do, of course, is normally we can see our modifier stack here. It's the blue wrench. And you see I have 2 modifiers on here. I have subdivisional surface and I have mirror. Now the thing is that these are actually on for both objects. And if I wanted to, I could actually get rid of the subdivisional surface one for this cube while keeping it on for the other one. It's just that since I kind of copied this original set of polygons off of this one, it kind of had that on. So you can keep your mirror modifier on, but get rid of your subdivisional modifier if you don't want that on, right? So that you can kind of see it's more in straight low resolution. Kind of up to you on how you want to approach and play with that, if you want to leave it off or on. So yeah, the other thing, of course, is that this little kind of orange guy right here, right? That gives you the ability to kind of do things like in front, which is very useful for kind of seeing all of your kind of retopo on top of the mesh, right? It's kind of cool for that. So keep that in mind. that this little orange guy kind of gives you the actual properties for this cube, and one of the areas is the viewport display, and you can turn things like in front on, right? There's a lot of other things in here, right? You can kind of go in here and kind of look at those if you want to, but this is kind of the important one here for us since we're working with Retopo. All right, so now that we've got that set up, and we can of course go to tool properties. It's kind of very top one here, so that's kind of like object properties, that wherever object selected. That's any modifiers you have applied. Your subdivisional surfaces, your smooth preview is a modifier, just like your mirror is a modifier, right? They're kind of right in here. Click add modifier. They're right in here. So it is a bit of a different approach to Maya, but it works fairly well when you get used to it. And of course, the one that looks like tools, right up here at the very top, that's your properties for the actual active tool. And in this case, the Retopo tool is actually this one right here, right? It's called Polybuild. And with Polybuild on, you'll see that you can come in here and you can always kind of grab a vertex and move it, right? And you see how you can kind of make those adjustments. And you'll notice it is sticking to the mesh, right? So you see how it is because of that being on, it's sticking to the surface, right? This is like the Maya equivalent make live, right? Maya has this. It's actually the very last magnet in Maya is make live, right? And that would allow you to kind of just draw with the quad draw tool, because that's actually the tool for doing this in Maya is its quad draw in modeling toolkit, whereas here is its polybuild. So the very last of the magnets in Maya would be your make live, which kind of is snap to object or faces. And you have polybuild here. Remember, we're in the modeling menu, right? We're not sculpting, we're not doing any of that stuff, right? Modeling is what we're doing, because we're doing our standard box modeling stuff. Remember, you can turn on industry compatible from the preferences key map, and that sets it up so that Maya navigation, double click on edge loops, QWERTY works, WER. All right, so we can adjust some of those, right? Kind of play with them a little bit. Now, with the Polybuild tool on, you can actually turn on other tools, right? So if I right click, you'll notice that, of course, it brings up, I'll make sure I'm in 3 though, right? 3 for faces. If I right click, you'll see that it kind of does bring up your options here. And of course, one of those is, where are we at? Actually, I want to be in edge mode, sorry, my bad. 2 for edges, right? If you right click, one of those is loop, cut, and slide. So if you want to, you can easily kind of come in here and still loop cut some extra loops in here, right? So keep that in mind, as you can easily kind of just go in here, loop, cut, slide, kind of just put some edges back in there. You see how it kind of actually tries to snap and follow the surface. So this will actually work and effectively kind of try to maintain its surface shape, right? So I can easily go back in here with loop, cut, slide. Remember, we can slide it, and you see how it kind of is trying to follow the surface? That's because of that snap to face. That's what's cool about it. See how it kind of tries to follow the contours? So we can easily just come in here and do some loop, cut, slides to add a little bit of extra geometry if we want to, right? So keep that in mind, right? And of course, actually, if you want to, you notice how you can kind of turn on all selection types at the same time, and that will give you all of your context menus, right? You'll notice though that without Polybuild on, like if we just come back to our regular selection tool, it's not really gonna kind of work for your selection stuff, so it's not a true multi-component feature, unfortunately. But it's kind of cool that if you're in edge mode and you right click, you can just do your, remember 2 for edge mode. Remember the right here though. You can easily do loop, cut, and slide even though your Polybuild's on, right? So the cool thing about that is you're still in the Polybuild mode, right? And you can still kind of go in here and just make these little adjustments, right? So keep that in mind, is you have that ability, if you want to kind of still basically work with these shapes and forms, right? So we're still, I'll make sure to hit 2 some in edge mode, right click, loop, slide, and cut. There we go, kind of puts that in there. And remember, if you want to, you can hit W for move, and kind of move will snap to it, right? So just keep that in mind. You can kind of keep adding loops even when you're in Polybuild tool, and you can keep making adjustments. But you'll see basically what I'm doing is I'm simply just kind of making a little bit of gear and armor, right? So really we're just kind of trying to make sure to add some loops in, make sure to kind of adjust some of the shape so it kind of fits fairly well to the mesh, right? Remember, you can break those open. You just move them back close enough, it'll start to merge. Remember, that's part of your mirror modifier, the merge limit, right? And having merge on that usually is on by default though, so usually not too much of a problem. There we go. And if need be, remember, you can always kind of add some extra stuff in here, right? So one of the things to keep in mind is if you hold down Control, right, you can actually kind of pull these edges off, right? Particularly if it's on an edge. Oh, here we go. Let me get a better view of that. Oh. Ah, my bad. Oh. Get off of there. And so keep in mind that, you can hold down Control to pull that out. I think I want to turn Create Quads off. What is going on here? That you're fighting me on that a little bit. Oh, duh, that's why. Yep. Remember, just left click actually does your regular edge mode. I was thinking Control. Control does do something different though, and you see how kind of in low res the auto merge actually works a lot better, right? So remember, just left clicking on these allows you to add, right? So if I just left click drag, you see how it drags out a whole quad, right? Auto welds. If you hold down Control, you'll notice you can kind of pull out from corners, right? That's what I was kind of wanting to show you. So if you hold down Control and you got to go in here, you'll see how you can kind of start to just drag out forms, right? Usually you kind of start in the corner though, like that, and then left click drag. So that'll kind of give you some ways to kind of use that retopo tool a little bit more to build more of this up if you want to, right? So I just kind of want to make sure to have a second video where I kind of showing you the basics. Usually you'll find that just the normal left click drag will work pretty well, right? So remember, if you just left click on an edge, it just grabs and drags that whole edge out. If you were to use Control, right, it'll kind of allow you to kind of drag out a whole quad, which sometimes behaves a little weird. But that's kind of the main options you have when it comes to the retopo tools inside of Blender. Not bad, fairly solid. Remember, if you want to add some edge loops in, of course, you can always just hold down right mouse button while you're in edge mode, right? And you have the loop cut slide, right? So just keep that in mind. 1, 2, and 3 kind of give you your ability to do different selection types, and you can keep just adjusting the forms and the shapes on these, right? So just keep that in mind. You can kind of keep playing around with the form and the shape as you work. But the big thing is that effectively this, that's probably not worked out well. Effectively that one right there is your snap, right? And really your poly build just allows you to kind of drag the vertices up, and you can see you kind of pull that guy a little bit far out. There we go. So you just have to be careful a little bit sometimes, right? All right. So there we go. Maybe grab that guy a little bit. There we go. And so it's going to fit around that waist a little bit better there. See, that guy got pulled a little bit. So sometimes you just got to be a little bit careful. Uh-oh. I feel like those have kind of gotten welded together. So if need be, we can always kind of, turn our poly build off, or go back to our regular selection tool up here, and we can always just kind of 3 for face mode, and we can go in here and just grab those faces, delete them, right? Remember, delete brings up this, and you want to dissolve faces. Oh, actually, in this case, just delete faces, because it'll take everything with it. And if you need to, you can rebuild those, right? So we can always go back to poly build. And like we said, that's that kind of that control feature will allow you to do this, and you just kind of do it from the corners. And you see poly build kind of already has that auto weld. And if you just left click drag, you see you can kind of often drag here, and it'll do some auto welding. So remember, just over an edge, you might have to just be a little bit careful sometimes. But you'll notice that auto weld, particularly when you're in low res, actually works a little better. That's why I wanted to kind of show you guys that you can just turn that off for your retopo. Remember, if you need to, you can always rebuild any part of this geometry as it goes along. Now, that's not the only thing I wanted to show you guys about this, right? Although I think I will go to 2 for edge mode, right-click, loop cut slide, kind of put an extra loop in there, just to give us a little bit more in that section right there. Like I said, of course, we can always move it around a little bit, just tweak some vertices. There we go. Like I said, this is kind of one of those areas where Blender's solid enough at the retopo stuff, but ultimately you will find that Maya's quad draw functionality is a bit stronger. but this does give you what you need, right? You will have what you need to retopo. And the whole point of retopoing is to really allow you to either rebuild parts of a character, or in this case, as we've been seeing we're doing here, we're just kind of just putting armor on the character, right? We're just kind of doing some clothes and making some nice little adjustments for that, right? So for what we're doing, it's going to just be easier for us to just kind of work that way instead of trying to build this all from scratch. It's just so much easier to retopo some gear and armor on there. It'd be a little trickier if we try to rebuild a part of a character with it, but these tools can be used for that. All right, so like I said, I did want to show you a few more things with this. Now at this point, we don't really want to use the polybuild tool anymore, right? Because that's what allows us to retopo with that snap faces. We just make sure that this object's selected, and things like in front, kind of from this one on, from the viewport display for this cube, and from there it's just left-click drag on an edge to kind of extrude out as a quad. Or control left click from a vertex can often let you kind of drag out a quad in a different way. And your tools like loop cut slide will still work, right? Depending on what selection mode you're in. 1, 2, or 3, right? So at the end of the day, right, that gives you some kind of 2 videos on how to actually start to lay down retopo, right? How you can actually use the polybuild tool to do that. In this case, I'm going to just turn my regular selection tool on, and we're going to also turn snap, that magnet, off, because I don't really want to use that anymore for that, right? Now, at this point, I could easily keep in front on or turn it off. It's kind of up to you. I think in this case, I want to keep it on to still do some stuff. If we wanted to, we could easily add a subdivisional surface modifier to this as well, right? Because maybe at this point, I do want it to be rounded again, since I'm going to be doing non-polybuild stuff. So remember, with this object selected, we can go down to kind of modifiers. It's that little blue guy right there. We can go to add modifier, and you'll see there's one in here called subdivisional surface. And you see what that does? It turns on Maya's equivalent of smooth preview. So there's a subdivisional surface under there. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind about this modifier. One, it's now down here. This little kind of triangle right here, right? It's the cage feature. If you click on that, you see how it actually fully approximates the smooth preview as you'd see it in Maya, which is great. You can also kind of tell the actual quality of the smooth preview as well, right? So you kind of have a couple of little slider controls here if you want to adjust them also for that. So you can kind of have it render at higher levels or have the quality at a higher level. It's kind of up to you. It doesn't really matter that much, right? So kind of see how that's the viewport itself, giving you level 1. Usually it's on by that for default, but that one's the good one. If you need to, also remember 3 for face mode. I can grab faces. Now in the select menu, there is something called select linked, and you can see the quick key for it's a little bracket, and that actually selects all the polygons that are connected to it. If you right click in face mode, there is shade smooth. And that'll actually get rid of any of that faceting. Some of you guys might see kind of shading like this on your models, right? So if you just click on that and then go to select, linked, and then you right click, see how we're in face selection mode, right? 3 for face. If you right click, you can do smooth shade, and that actually shade smooths that whole thing, right? There's actually, I think, some other controls elsewhere for that as well, but it's just so easy to get to these things by the right click menus, right? So remember, whatever selection type you're in, when you right click, it's going to bring up most of the tools. If not, you'll find them in here. So keep that in mind, is that particularly when you're in the modeling menu here, you really have a nice clean interface. Some of your major tools are right here, they're all right here. If you right click, they pop up there for whatever, if you're face, edge, or vertex mode. And even those selection types are right up here. So I'm just trying to really reinforce these things with Blender for you. Because once you actually get used to it, it's actually pretty, particularly with the 2.8 above series, it's actually quite good, right? It's actually pretty neat. You'll find you spend enough time with it and you'll generally like it as much as Maya for modeling. All right, so there we go. But what I wanted to do is I wanted to go to edge mode, right? 2 for edges. Boom, right? We're back in edge mode. And what we can do is I want to build armor that's not just sticking to the body, right? Remember that. This is some good stuff to have sticking to the body, but maybe I want this to hang down lower. So while I'm in edge mode, right, 2 for edges, I can select an edge, shift, remember shift still adds to selections, click another edge, and if I right click, you will notice that there is extrude edges. and then we could bring these down. Remember how we could extrude border edges inside of Maya? You could do that in Blender, right? W is your move tool, right? Remember, you can grab any of these handles, but the middle mouse button automatically does the view move, right? In Maya, it actually will do whatever the last handle selected is, but in Blender, it automatically always uses the view move, which actually I love. I love that in Blender. Kind of miss a little bit in Maya. If in Maya the last thing selected was the center one, then it would work just like that, but it doesn't work that way by default. It uses whatever the last handle is. But you notice these handles are all like Maya's, right? So one of the things hopefully you guys are seeing with this video, these videos, is that I could teach this in any software actually, right? The fundamental basic tools and ideas work pretty similarly in just about all software. So it really just becomes how friendly is the software to work with. And that's one of the reasons why I like Maya a lot, and I absolutely love Modo so much. And I'm really coming to like Blender a lot too. Is that they really kind of are converging on a lot of the same ideas which work well. Remember double left clicking, right? Just like in Maya, if you double left click on an edge, you can select an edge loop, so we can easily move these out. And this is why I turn that snap off, right? The magnet. Just like in Maya, the magnet is your snap tools, right? So that way, when I move these, they don't snap to the surface, right? So you see how I can kind of just grab these things out. If I want to make this a little longer, I could, left click, shift left click, right click, extrude edges. Remember, of course, you could set quick keys to these things as well, right? You'll see that there is extrude here. You'll see there's actually some extrude tools in here as well. There's your bevel, right? So remember, there actually are many tools here. Like here's your extrude stuff, right? If you left click on it, anytime you see a little triangle, that means if you hold down left mouse button, you can get more options. So you could easily kind of just assign quick keys to those things if you wanted to as well. W for move, and I can kind of bring these in a little bit. There we go. We can kind of just shape that a little bit, and that kind of gives us a little bit of a flap hanging down. It also shows you that all of that stuff we learned about building our spaceship on the last project, you can 100% apply in Blender, right? So I can come back here now, and I want to kind of maybe grab some edges back here. So remember, Q is your quick key for selection, and of course Shift will add, right? So we can kind of add to selections, right? So I can just grab these. I'm going to right-click extrude, right? Right-click extrude edges, bring this out a bit. And then, of course, I can right-click extrude edges again, bring this out a bit. And what we can do is we can easily start to shape this more and more. Remember, E is rotate, and then if I hold that middle mouse button, it does view rotate. R for scale, middle mouse button kind of can scale those down, right? Remember, you can have the handles, but the middle mouse button automatically does kind of the uniform or the views for the move and rotates, which, like I said, I actually have kind of fallen in love with that in Blender. It's kind of cool. So I can right click and I can extrude edges again, bring this kind of down a little more. Maybe middle mouse button to bring this in a little bit more there. And what we can start to do is then kind of extrude edges out here again. And you see as we bring these closer, they'll start to sew together with that merge limit, right? Remember, if we're in the blue, remember there's an actual mirror modifier, right? It's actually in here. It's called, I know what it's called. I'm just find it in here. Where we are, mirror. You apply that mirror modifier and you can pick your axis, you make sure merge is on, which I believe usually it is. You can turn the merge tolerance up a little bit more. And you're in good shape, right? I have found that it does tend to be, and you said you can still bring that back out. I have found that even though there technically is kind of a mirror topology feature for the move tool, I find sometimes that gets conflict with the mirror modifier, so I find the mirror modifier on its own really does what you need it to do for that. Keep in mind that you might have like double head syndrome, like when you first extrude your character's heads out, right? You might have two heads. You might see it's a little sharp down there. One of the easiest ways to do that is to actually, in the mirror modifier itself, right? Blue, here's the mirror modifier. Remember, this guy right here can kind of show off all your features. You can also just turn X off temporarily, right? And then you can delete whatever face is and then turn it back on. So keep that in mind, is that if you turn that off, you can kind of see just one side for the moment. If you see any faces inside your double head, you can delete those, right? So kind of once you get used to how these modifiers work, they take a little more to set up, and you can kind of pull the seam apart. It actually works pretty well, right? It's actually pretty good. So ultimately, when you spend time with Blender, you'll find that particularly the 2.8 series, pretty great. I'm actually kind of really, really liking Blender a lot lately. But you see how we can start to kind of create this, just like we were doing with our ship. So one of the things I like to show off with this is how far you can actually push not only retopo tools like polybuild to build armor that some of it fits to the body, because remember how we copied some of this off, but then some of that we just kind of drew out on our own that doesn't fit to the body. And then when we don't even want to do that anymore, we can go back to our regular tools with snap off, and we can use extrude border edge to make the parts that stick off the surface, right? So remember, just, you know, your move tool can be on, left click, shift left click, right click, because you're in edge mode, right? We're in edge mode 2. 2 is the quick key for that. Right click, extrude edges. We could easily bring these up, right? Remember, if you want to, you could turn your tweak tool on, and that can allow you to tweak pretty easily as well, so you don't have to always do the free moves. And what's cool is that you can actually switch to your selection types, and the tweak tool will still be on, right? So keep that in mind. In fact, it might be a good idea just to remind you guys, if you right-click on a tool, right, you can actually change the shortcut. In this case, I think I'm going to do set this to Control T. There we go. And now you'll see that's Control T. So if I hit Q, it goes back to my regular normal selection tool, right? I set Circle to my, or Tab to my drag select. And then if I hold down Control T, it'll go to Tweak. But remember, if you left click on this one, because it's got a little triangle, if you hold down your left mouse button, they're all there, right? And you can kind of switch back and forth between those, right? So keep these things in mind as you're working. These will really allow you to do some cool shaping pretty quickly if you want to. So Q for regular selection tool, just like it would be in Maya. 2 for edge mode, right? And I can grab these edges. Right click, extrude edges, bring those up a little bit. W for move, right? Bring those forward a little bit. Remember, you have to be a little careful. We'll pop that seam sometimes, but it's pretty easy to fix again. E for rotate to rotate this. A view move, right? And you see I can kind of start to build a little bit of kind of something that comes over the head, right? Remember, if you need to, you can double click on an edge and it selects an edge loop, so we can kind of keep adjusting these, right? There we go. Right click, extrude edges, and I can bring that back out a little bit. Maybe E for rotate to do a little bit of view rotate. Remember, double left click on an edge and you can kind of bring that up. And you see how you can kind of really come in here and make some nice little adjustments to kind of add to the way you want the armor to be built up. I can grab this edge, right, and I can right click extrude edges to bring this out. There we go. Maybe R for scale, middle mouse button, so it does a uniform scale. Right click extrude edges again. Maybe a little bit of E for rotate, just to kind of do a view rotate. Maybe a view rotate a little bit from that edge too. And you see you can switch and do your view rotates. That's that middle mouse button, right? And then what we could do is we could easily just, you know, Q for regular selection, just select both these edges, right? So select that one, shift click that one, right click, and you'll notice that one of your options in your edge menu is bridge edges or edge loops, right? So just like you could extrude and bridge border edges in Maya, that's exactly what's going on here as well inside of Blender. Remember, there is a video further back that will actually show you how to fix the tweak tool, because it's in 2.82a. It's a little weird the way they kind of set it up. So that would be edit preferences. In the key mapping section, you'd actually want to open up, I think it was 3D view. Just trying to remember where it's at. I think it's object mode, 3D view. Yeah. So if you, in that key mapping area, we turn intercompatible on and you open up 3D view, object mode, 3D view tweak tool, you guys might see by default that there's no select one, but there's kind of these other ones. You could just delete those by clicking on that X. And then what I did is I actually added my own item, called it select. And then what I did is when you kind of do that and you kind of click on this, right, it opens it up, you can type in 3D view select. Make sure all the rest of these are on and deselect nothing is on, and that's actually going to make the tweak tool work exactly the way it used to in the earlier versions before 2.82a. So it's kind of one of those weird things. You have to pack it a little bit to get it to work. But once you do, your tweak tool totally works again like it was working in the earlier version. There we go. We can kind of tweak these a little bit if we wanted to, just to get a little shape. If we wanted to, we could of course fill a hole here. All right, so Q for regular selection tool. Double click on the border edge loop. We're in edge mode still, right? 2 for edges. Right click, and you see there's actually a fill tool, but it kind of does all these quads, right? So what you might do is you might actually go to face up here, right? So remember, sometimes you won't get all the options you're looking for with the right click. But remember, they're basically up here. So we can go to face selection mode, and you will see that there's actually a fill here, which is basically doing the same thing. But there's also a fill, where is it? Grid fill. And in this case, it's not actually going to work for us. What is going on here? I'm trying to remember where I feel like there's a normal fill tool as well. But in this case, if we need to, we can always just do fill. And then what we can do is we can always come back in T for edge mode. And we can always just kind of delete. Remember, with edges, you want to dissolve edges. And you can always come back in here and delete and just dissolve those edges you don't want pretty quickly, just to kind of rebuild it. You don't even have to fill this in if you don't want to, right? It's kind of one of those things where you just want to leave that open, you can. I just want to remind you guys, though, that you do have some fill tools. Grid fill, if this was set up a little bit more normally, would do all quads. Just keep that stuff in mind, right, that there are some fill tools. You might need to kind of take some edges out. In this case, I feel like we're okay. I kind of wanted that to be there anyways. I just wanted to show you that you could kind of reconnect all that stuff. And the last thing I want to show you, because you guys can do as much or as little crazy armor stuff on this as you want, what we can do is we can go to 3 for face mode, select the face. Remember, in the select menu, there is that select linked. And if I right click in face mode, you'll see that there is actually, let me see, where is it at? There it is. You'll notice if you right click, it's one of the things I noticed. Sometimes you don't get everything in here, right? As useful as this is for like all your major stuff, not everything's in the context menu, right? So if you go to face, you'll see there is something called solidify faces, right? And what you can do when you click drag, or I want to say, where is it? Let's see here. So solidify faces. You'll notice down here there is kind of a little options box, right? So sometimes when you bring these tools up, it's kind of down here. And what you can do is you can just kind of turn that up a little bit, right? So you can kind of adjust your numbers a little bit if you need to kind of thicken this. So in the face menu, solidify faces is your thicken, right? So there we go. And then we can click off. Now in this case, you'll notice that I will kind of have that double polygon syndrome there. I'm going to come back to that in a minute though. So I'm going to select faces. Remember, select linked. I know the quick key, but I just want to make sure you guys know where it's at. It's bracket. And one of the things, we'll close that down. We don't need that open. And one of the things that you'll notice is we should have, let's see here, just want to remember where this feature is at, because we should have flip in here somewhere. Let me see here. I don't know where that's at. Man. I remember flip polygons is at. Let's see here. Normals. There we go. Mesh, normals, flip, and that'll flip those polygons, right? So remember, you do have, things in here like that stuff. That smooth faces is there as well. So in mesh menu, normals flip. That'll allow you to flip your polygons. But you notice how our seam down the center is kind of showing harder than it should? That's because of that double head problem. So that's where the kind of blue guy right here is great, because we can just kind of click on X. And you see how we can kind of see the faces here that we want to kind of select and get rid of? Right? So we can kind of select these, hit delete. Remember, faces, right? Delete faces, that'll get rid of those. And then we're going to want to kind of do a similar thing here. Now remember, you can use circle select, right? It is right up here, circle select. And this can allow you to kind of just do your drag select pretty quick. Remember, control will deselect, shift will add, right? go. Hit delete. Select faces. Usually it's only edges that you have to dissolve. Faces, usually you're fine just deleting the face. You might want to make sure you're in close enough with your drag select. Delete. On your keyboard, right? Dissolve is what you usually want to do for edges, but for faces, delete. There we go. And then what we could do is we could turn our mirror X back on, and you'll see that this should work pretty well again. In this case, you can kind of see how we maybe need to go back to edge mode, just kind of quickly grab that edge, move it in, and see how it automatically starts to weld back up. So that is one thing to keep in mind, is that you will, when you do some of these things, it won't get rid of that seam down the center, which is actually a little bit annoying. It's kind of one of the drawbacks. You saw, though, it's actually quite easy to fix in Blender. So it's a little bit annoying, but quite easy to fix. And now you see, in particular, I can go back to here, to this property, the orange one, turn in front off, and now you can see we actually have armor for this character, right? So that'll be a great place to stop, because this video's definitely gone on a good amount of time. So it'll be a great place to stop.